What is a dynasty? I heard this topic brought up the other day. I will get into that in just a second. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. It's good to be here on a Thursday evening at 6:30 Eastern Time. Welcome in, everyone. We've got the phone lines open, and as you all know, regardless of the topic that I present, we are open to talk college football across the board. So we don't have to talk about the topic that I've presented. But again, we got together yesterday with our guy Des and Dre on our Michigan live stream, which comes your way every Wednesday at 5:30 Eastern Time. A little plug there for the Michigan channel. The Wolverines, maize and blue, a little 5:30 Eastern Time action with Des and Dre every Wednesday night. And Des had been watching, I believe, Colin Cowherd is where he got this. Not that this is a new topic in any such way, and I don't even know, based on what's going on in sports right now, why it was brought up. But they were talking about dynasties. And what is a dynasty? And since we were on the Michigan show, Des brought to the table whether Bo Schembechler was the head coach of a dynasty. Was Michigan football a dynasty under Bo Schembechler? I'm sure you have your definition of a dynasty. Maybe you've not thought of it. Maybe it just kind of hits you. Yeah, the Patriots are a dynasty under Bill Belichick. The Cowboys under Tom Landry, a dynasty. The Steelers, Chuck Noll, the 70s Steelers, dynasty. The Packers in the 60s, a dynasty. The Yankees at various times throughout their history could not be argued, dynasty. Dynasty from the Babe Ruth era to the Mickey Mantle era, and then maybe a mini dynasty under Derek Jeter and company in the late 90s. The Boston Celtics, when you win 11 NBA championships in 13 years, nobody's going to question your status as a dynasty. So what is a dynasty? What elements have to comprise a dynasty? For me, it's two things. Two things are obvious. Number one, it would be winning. Got to win. Do you have to win championships, though? The championship in that sport. Do you have to win Super Bowls? Do you have to win a World Series or multiple World Series? Do you have to win multiple championships in your sport? Does one championship do it? One championship surrounded by years and years of excellence. The Atlanta Braves of the 1990s won one World Series in 1995. They surrounded that one World Series with years and years of dominance in the National League and several World Series appearances, but just the one World Series championship. And we will give a number of examples in college football through the years and let you be the judge of whether those are dynasties. I got to say that I don't necessarily have an ironclad thought process on this. Winning is number one. And for me, that's winning consistently, and it's also winning championships. So some combination of winning consistently, like Bo Schembechler did from 1969 through 89, 21 seasons at Michigan. He won 13 Big Ten championships. Now, let's put that into perspective, though, because Des brought that statistic to the table, and it has to be clarified, though, because on the surface, if you win your conference championship 13 times in 21 years, that seems pretty dominant, and it is impressive. That is a huge amount of success, but that was during an era of shared championships. Only 5 of those 13 conference championships for Bo Schembechler were outright championships. Only 5 of 13. So when you think about an era of outright championships that we experience right now because of conference championship games, if a particular coach won 13 conference championships in 21 years, where there would only be 8 other championships divided by the entire rest of the conference. But back in that day, you had shared championships. And Ohio State and Michigan shared a ton of championships. Therefore, during that same time when Michigan was winning 13 conference championships, Ohio State was winning 12. So that takes a lot of shine off of that number of conference championships. And in Bo Schembechler's case, he may be, and you'll have to serve up other examples, but off the top of my head, I cannot think of a more successful coach in college football. The most successful coach in the history of college football who did not win a national championship. I cannot think of anybody who's even close to his status as a college football coach who has not won a national championship. Maybe I've not given it a ton of thought, but I think that guy would have popped out in my head at some point. Bo Schembechler at Michigan. Is that a dynasty? Just consistently winning, go to Rose Bowls, go to conference championships, and win and finish in the top 10 consistently? Or does the absence of a national championship completely negate the argument for dynasty status? And then when you're talking about a dynasty, are you talking about a collection of players, a team? It seems to be more attached to the coach in college athletics, Mike Krzyzewski, Denny Crum, Dean Smith, Bobby Knight, and then the football coaches that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. In professional sports, it seems to be more tagged to a particular core group of players. The Pittsburgh Steelers in the 1970s, of course, they were coached that entire Super Bowl run of 4 championships in 6 years by Chuck Noll. Yes. But it was that group of players that once they left and there was another wave of players, even if that wave of players would have continued the Steeler dynasty, then the dynasty would have been more attached to Chuck Noll, like the Bill Belichick dynasty with the Patriots, than it is to that collection of Terry Bradshaw, Mean Joe Green, Rocky Blyer, Jack Lambert, Jack Ham, Mel Blount, Lynn Swann, John Stallworth, Franco Harris, Mike Webster. And we could go on and on. It's a fascinating topic. It does not have to be the topic of the night, but I serve it up. What's a dynasty? And I was going to go through some possible examples in college football, some obvious examples, and then also some possibilities. Bear Bryant had a dynasty. Nick Saban is leading a dynasty. Does Dabo Swinney lead a dynasty? Is this a dynasty at Clemson? Did Urban Meyer lead a dynasty at Florida or at Ohio State? Bo Schembechler again. Bobby Bowden, who spaced out 2 national championships over a huge span of time at Florida State. He did win the 2 national championships, but more of a consistent winner year to year at Florida State. Joe Paterno, what he accomplished at Penn State from 1966 through 2011, that's 45 years of football. 45 years of football. 2 national championships. But he also had 3 undefeated seasons that were not recognized as national championships. You can only win all your games. And again, the national championship statistic is beyond overrated. All right. Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. The phone lines will be open here in just a second as soon as I complete the setup process. We are just about there. And hope everyone's having a good night. I want to remind everyone that we've got all-time program rankings. Our series is almost complete. So we have posted all 5 conferences, excluding the SEC. I've got to get to the SEC, so the SEC has yet to go. Then we're going to put it all together and deliver our all-time program rankings. And I have merely delivered the numbers. I put together the criteria, the system, and displayed the numbers. On that final video, I'm going to give some context to the numbers And I'm not just simply going to go by the numbers and say number 5 is better than number 6. If I give it some thought and some context, and we determine that some of the rankings aren't necessarily accurate, then I will certainly make that call. All right. Looks like folks want to call in and talk college football. And again, we do not need to talk about the topic of dynasties. We can talk about whatever's on your mind concerning college football. We just had a tremendous conversation with Brian Driscoll of Irish Breakdown. So be looking out for that conversation in its entirety right here on the main channel. Or guess what you can do for us? Head on over to the Notre Dame channel and subscribe. We are just a few subscribers away from 1,000 at the Notre Dame channel. And we will be delivering, I believe, 14 videos from Brian and myself and our discussion on Notre Dame. We went through the entire offense and defense and special teams and a number of other more interesting topics concerning Notre Dame football. Fascinating conversation and breakdown from Brian Driscoll on Irish Breakdown. So head on over to the Notre Dame channel and subscribe. And again, be on the lookout for our conference rankings, all-time program rankings. We still have yet to post the SEC, and then we will put it all together. Thanks for joining us here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hello, Mark. It's the real MVP. How are you doing this evening?
It sure is. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. So I would like to talk about the concept of dynasties that you mentioned.
Yep.
And the first thing I would like to ask you as a Kansas City Chiefs fan, are we currently in a dynasty even though we've only won one Super Bowl? Even though we've been in the last 4 AFC championship games?
I am going to liken this conversation and this debate and the bar similar to what a Hall of Famer is in any sport. So we can think of Hall of Famers who are no doubt Hall of Famers. Tom Brady, no doubt Hall of Famer. Okay, but then we have a number of people that would be on the fence, of course. Okay, the greater players or the players who accomplished at a higher level, but let's say did it for a shorter period of time. So let's say player A had a 7-year career that was incredible. Player B had a 15-year career. He wasn't as good, but he produced for 15 years. He was really, really good for 15 years. But the other guy was just, well, I think there's a comparison that can be made there. If we've got 2 players and they both played for 10 years and one was just one of the greatest of all time and the other one was really, really good, well, then there's player A certainly much more deserving of the Hall of Fame. But I think there's a balance between the two that has to be struck. So in the Kansas City Chiefs case, let's say Andy Reid was there for another, how long has he been there now? He's been there a while, like 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, he's been there a while.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to tell you, is my guess.
So for Andy Reid in particular, let's say he stayed for another 10 years and they didn't just crush it, but let's say they got back to another Super Bowl or 2, one of 2, let's say, and they consistently won. They were consistently going to the playoffs for the next 10 years, and then he hangs it up. Well, that's what I would consider to be a consistent winner that didn't have just a blast of dominance, but won consistently, versus if, let's say, another coach took over another franchise and in the span of 5 years, they won 3 Super Bowls and then he's gone. So you've got the consistent winner who still gets a championship or 2 or 3 versus the just dominance, sheer dominance for a short period of time. So I think those are equal, is what I'm trying to say. That to me, those are equal toward dynasty status.
Okay. Now I'm going to give an answer toward dynasties that isn't a tangible number.
Yep.
So that might be frustrating, but I think most people will understand what I mean. So I believe in order to be part of a dynasty, you have to be consistently the team to beat every year. So like when the Patriots were on their 20-year run, every year somebody would have to beat the Patriots to either get to the Super Bowl or to win the Super Bowl. Alabama is a perfect example of this current. You're going to have to beat Alabama if you want to win the college football playoff in some form or fashion.
Okay. I like that. I think it's valid. Is there always a team to beat, though? Is there a team to beat in the NFL right now?
There's not always a dynasty.
Okay.
There isn't always a dynasty. Dynasties aren't. What's special about them is there isn't always a dynasty that occurs. There's sometimes gaps. I think the NBA is probably the best example of this. Like we had there was a 5-year gap between Michael Jordan's Bulls dynasty and Kobe and Shaq's dynasty.
Okay. And there was nothing that the San Antonio Spurs did during that time or continue to do that would be considered a dynasty.
No, because the problem with them in being a dynasty, I think a dynasty has to be a short period of time. The Spurs are just the greatest program in NBA history.
Well, wait a second. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I just laid out 2 formulas for a dynasty: a spurt of dominance and consistent winning over time. And then we laid it out that the Chiefs might be headed more toward the consistency over a period of time. And it sounded like you agreed with that as a dynasty.
Yeah, but I think their titles are too far apart. I think you have to win a title every so often. And what have they got? They won in 99, 14. Probably a few I'm missing in there, but I think you have to win the chip every 5 years or so to at least. Yeah, they were a dynasty at one point, not between the Bulls and the Lakers.
Well, this was another one of my points that I was making before I took your call, is that I think of some dynasties being attached to the coach, which this would be the case with Popovich. Oh, yeah. If you considered the Spurs a dynasty, then it would be Popovich's dynasty. It wasn't one little collection of players that won, 3 championships in 4 years and then they were gone, and that was the dynasty.
Right. I could agree with that. So let me ask you this, Mark. Do you think there's any way possible for multiple dynasties to be occurring within the same sport?
Ooh, that's a good one. Popovich has 5 NBA championships.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I think it's difficult. I think that, again, depending on your definition, that the Alabama and Clemson dynasties could be overlapping. Alabama's got a dynasty. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. Nick Saban has a dynasty. Okay, that's a dynasty. So does anybody else have a dynasty right now? Well, the conversation we had on the Michigan channel yesterday seemed to be that, at least if I'm not misrepresenting Dez's take, is that consistent winning, like if we applied what he said about Bo Schembechler right now, then Ohio State's got a dynasty. Clemson's got a dynasty. Georgia's working on one. They probably do have one. And Oklahoma kind of has one, even though they have not been competitive in the playoff. So they're a bit of a different deal. But to me, that's tough. Again, as I brought this to the table, this is a topic that, unlike most, I typically have this is my stance, this is where I stand. It's going to take a lot to move me off of this mark. But when it comes to dynasties, I don't have a hard and fast rule. I served up the 2 criteria that I think are obvious, and that's winning winning championships, and length of time, longevity.
Okay. Now, I know some people in the chat are going off at me for saying the Spurs are the greatest team in NBA history or greatest organization, but they have the highest winning percentage out of every team, and they don't have a below 500 winning percentage against any team. I would consider that a pretty good organization. Wouldn't you, Mark?
Do you think you think the Spurs are a greater organization in the history of the NBA than the Lakers?
I think consistently over time, yes, but I think the peaks and valleys, if you want to talk the highest of the high, it's the Lakers and the Celtics. But if you want to go over a long period of time of consistently, it's the Spurs.
All right, so I have no idea.
It just depends on what you value.
I gotcha. I have no idea what's been going on in the NBA for the last, well, I would say in the last 5 years. I certainly watched all the Cavs Warriors and know that LeBron went, 10 or 11 consecutive years with reaching the finals every year?
I think it was 9 or 10. It wasn't 11. I think he was at 9
was
before
at least
he switched
10.
to the
But
Lakers.
Anyway, the Spurs were really good before Popovich, but they didn't do anything significant. They didn't win the championship, did not get to the finals. So it's a Popovich thing with the Spurs. And if you're looking at the entirety of the organization, first of all, that they were an ABA franchise, so that they were not competing against the Lakers and the Celtics in their heyday. And it's just it's a difficult comparison to make because you've got franchises in the Lakers and the Celtics that go back to the origin of the NBA, and then you've got with the Spurs a newer franchise.
Okay. Well, Mark, let me throw a different NBA team at you. Okay. This team is the 5th place team all time in winning percentage, but has never won a title. They're actually the highest winning percentage for any sport that has not won a title. Yes.
Okay. The 5th highest winning percentage in the history of the NBA?
Yeah.
With no title.
No title.
Is that the Phoenix Suns?
Nope.
Oh.
It is the Utah Jazz.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, it did. There's a great one right there. The real MVP. Stockton and Malone. Did they have a dynasty? They never won a championship.
Yeah. I mean, the person they lost to every year, he was pretty good.
Well,
some would call him the GOAT, but
sure.
I honestly don't know if they're considered a dynasty. Maybe for their conference they were, because they were consistently great every year in and out in the 90s with Stockton and Malone. And I mean, you look at the league leaders individually. Malone's now 3rd in points, and Stockton's 1st in assists and steals. And it's not really close in steals either. So they're a really good organization as well. But Mark, that's all I got for you this evening. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And let's get Mark's Notre Dame channel to 1,000 subs.
There we go. Thanks, man. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Leading our NBA segment tonight. This is going to become a norm, I believe. I believe we're going to have a 10-minute NBA segment each and every night here at the Voice of College Football, courtesy the real MVP. But I enjoyed it. As you could tell, I've got some periphery knowledge of the NBA. I did follow it from like the late 70s to probably more like the early 2000s. And then I really got into the Cavs because of my son when LeBron was taking them to 4 consecutive finals. Is that a dynasty? They won one. Was that Cavs team? Is that a dynasty? I don't think of them as being a dynasty. They were playing possibly against a dynasty, the Warriors. All right. Next up here, the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Yeah, you know it's off-season college football if you start talking NBA basketball.
Can you believe that?
Rogers.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know you delved into that area, but
well, it was brought up. And
sure.
I will say, David, that yes, other Mark Rogers from other nights, other shows would be scolding this Mark Rogers for taking on that much of an NBA conversation here.
I would say this. This will be my only NBA point. I started watching the NBA. I'll show my age here, but I started watching all sports probably about mid '80s, as I mentioned to you with Ohio State football. I would say the closest thing, by the way, to kind of colliding at the same time, wouldn't you say Birds Celtics, Magic's Lakers? I mean, Birds Celtics won three titles in the '80s. Magic's Lakers won 5. That's kind of, they were, they battled each other for a decade.
I believe you answered that question. That's the answer. I consider both of them to be dynasties.
Right.
There you go.
I mean, the better run of the Celtics was that Bill Russell area.
Sure.
When they won a lot in the '60s.
But they were still consistently in the finals from Bird's second season through, for the next 7 years, 80, 81 to 87.
Right. Yeah, just that Magic's Lakers kind of outlasted them,
They outlasted them, and they, in a sense, preceded them too. But it was more Kareem's Lakers preceded them, which would lead me to say that the Cowboys and the Steelers were simultaneous dynasties.
Yeah, the '70s. Yeah, well, that's true. Actually, interesting enough, the Cowboys were the only NFC team to win a Super Bowl in the '70s, I believe.
Yes.
So I did want to get to college football here because I think you hit on something with these coaches I wanted to bring up about coaches with dynasties. And you mentioned Bo Schembechler. I think that there's something to just being, consistently winning is got to be separated from having a dynasty. I do think that some people put dynasty in the realm of kind of a run. You get on a run, and that's what's considered a dynasty. And usually it's a run of championships because that's kind of what's associated with the professional level. But I think in the college level, I think if you get on a kind of a run of championships. I mean, Tom Osborne was kind of an example of this at Nebraska. Remember, they were good for a bunch of years, but then he got on a run in the '90s where he won, the 3 national championships in 4 years.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If Tom Osborne does not win the national championships at the end of his career, then he is Bo Schembechler. But he did win the national championships at the end of his. I cannot think of another coach that comes anywhere close to Bo's success that did not win a national championship.
Right. Now, I think that he did fall in that area, and you did make the point. I think it's a fair one that before really the BCS era, Mark, even, when I first started watching college football and you started watching college football, we didn't necessarily, our whole goal as being Ohio State fans was beat Michigan and go play in the Rose Bowl and win the Rose Bowl. The national title was decided by sports writers. So we never really, it was not anything that was kind of out there until we really established a game in '98 to definitively say, okay, now we got a game to decide this whole thing. Then I think it started to become in people's mindset more. At least it did as me as a fan at that particular time frame. Wouldn't you say?
I would say that a little bit of both, meaning that I was aware of the national championship and wanted Ohio State to win national championships in the '80s. And recognized the national champion as the national champion much more than I do now. but yes, there was less significance to it. There was more of a shared appreciation for all of postseason, all the bowl games, especially the major bowl games. And if you finished 10-2 and won the Rose Bowl, then that was a phenomenal season. Yep.
Right. Well, because the Rose Bowl was always thought, because it was our biggest game, being in the Midwest, being in the Big Ten, and obviously, the term the granddaddy of them all. The only thing I said about national championships, because it was always decided by sports writers. Because, Paterno, you mentioned him. He did nothing wrong in 1968 and 1969 and 1973 and 1994, he did everything right. He won every single one of his games. And 4 of those times, he didn't go away with a national championship. So, you know what I mean? It was something like, I mean, you could do everything right, and there was a period of time where you couldn't get a national championship. I mean, that still kind of could be the same thing today, especially for the smaller programs. But you know what I mean? It's tough to say, hey, you know, you do this, you did all you're supposed to do, and you know that'll guarantee you something, because it's not. In college football, it's very much, I mean, might not even go your way.
Yeah, since 1998, we have only seen, let me check myself, one instance where a Power 5 team has gone undefeated and not won a national championship.
But one year definitely comes to mind.
Well, I'm not talking about Ohio State's probation season. I'm talking about playing through the postseason.
Well, Auburn in 04, Mark.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yes, I would never argue and certainly believe that the national championship is more valid today than it was in 1975.
Right. I mean, that's really all that I'm saying is that,
yep.
You know, at that time it was kind of a different era. I think that you tied something together to. And, you know, maybe this does help like a Bo Schembechler's cause or any other coach's cause that didn't win a national championship, which is, you mentioned winning percentage. It's always been a driver of it.
Yeah. So does the current Dabo Sweeney era Clemson qualify as a dynasty, or did Urban Meyer lead a dynasty at Ohio State?
Sure. I think, you know, like, you know what I would also put up there, too, that had an incredible run. Now, he didn't win a lot of national championships over his run, and he was, you know, kind of in the BCS era with Bobby Bowden.
Sure.
But they were consistently always contending, and they did win a couple.
But see, I think once you win one, for most people, that satisfies their definition.
Right, exactly. Because, you know, I mean, still the goal is they're going to say that you've won all these games, but you never won a national. Because I remember that was hanging out there for him, and then it was hanging out there for Tom Osborne at that particular period of time in the 90s, is that they had all these great teams. I think that the one thing that was hurting, you know, Osborne is he kept on losing those bowl games, though, too. And that's the other thing that hurt Bo for all those years, is he had an awful record in the Rose Bowl. You know, he went, 2-8.
Absolutely. All right, David.
You know, it's just, all right, Mark, just a few things to throw out as kind of ideas, you know, for the criteria here, because I know that we all kind of throw out different ways to define this thing.
Good stuff. Well, I appreciate the call, David.
Mark, you take care of yourself.
Yeah, have a good night.
You too. Take care.
All right, coming up next here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Chris.
Hey, Chris. How you doing?
How are you, Mark?
I'm good.
Good.
What's going on tonight?
Nothing. I just wanted to add, I guess, to what the last caller was talking. I don't know. I'm not the best at remembering. I wish I was. I'm sorry. I apologize in advance. I wish I had all the information I needed right in front of me and I could just tell you what it is. But I'm not sure. I don't think that 2-8 is accurate. I think it's 5-11. But I'm not going to say he was wrong because I don't have the information. But
2-8 in the Rose Bowl.
Had a better
2-8 in the Rose Bowl.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I believe
okay,
that's.
Well,
I believe that's. I wouldn't stake my life on it, but I'm almost positive. Schembechler's 2-8 in the Rose Bowl and 5-12 in bowl games. That sounds right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's just me being nitpicky. It's not me being, that's fine. I mean, people they skewer facts or whatever, and then they use them as like weapons. But that's fine. I guess what I'm trying to get leading into, I guess, is, I don't like it personally, and this is just my own objection. It's not something that people need to take exception to, but we shouldn't someone like Bo Schembechler, he can't even defend himself now. I mean, he's dead, but I think we should hold him in higher maybe regard. and Paterno. You know, I mean, I guess I'm being a little bit of a jerk tonight, but you know, they can't defend themselves. You know what I mean? It's like it's not going to do a whole lot of good to tell these people that they were. You know, I don't know where. I wouldn't know exactly where these people would position on the ranking scale as far as coaching, but you know, I was led to believe that Bo Schembechler was among the best coaches ever to come around. And I think it began when was it through Miami of Ohio? I'm not really sure, but
yes,
you know, him and Woody Hayes, obviously they were, I think they were friends, or at least, you know, before they, well, you know, not when they coached, but I think they knew each other at Miami of Ohio. But anyway, you know, I don't think it's good to make these people, you know, look like they weren't what they could do, because I think it takes a lot to even be a coach. You know, that's without ever having been one. You know, and I guess if they weren't good enough, I guess that's when they get fired. But you know, I can't speak for Bo Schembechler. I just think that, you know, we have to give credit where credit's due, though. I think he beat a really good Ohio State team, like was it 1968, Mark? You probably remember better than I would.
69.
But
yep.
You know, that couldn't have been easy. That couldn't have been an easy thing to do. And then I think he lost the Rose Bowl. But you know, I mean, he kept, you know, I think to do what he did, you know, I think you have to kind of tip your hat. That's just my opinion, by the way. You kind of have to tip your hat. And like, Gary Barnett at Northwestern, I think he led a Northwestern team to you know, that's not every day Northwestern goes to the Rose Bowl, you know, and it's kind of like, I guess we could skewer him for what he didn't do when he was at Colorado, but, you know, which, you know, he didn't really live up to what they thought he might be at Colorado, but he did okay. I mean, you know, it's like, I just kind of wonder if after they're gone, you know, it's like, I guess it's like, maybe it's one of those things where it's like, I'm sensitive to it because I haven't had much success in my life, but, you know, I guess if they were incompetent, which I'm not going to say they were, but I mean, their record will show it. You know, you don't have to like even debate it. You know, if they weren't up to what they needed to be, then it'll show through what their record was. But you know, I think some of these people are coaching legends, though. That's kind of where I'm a little upset. It's like we're kind of telling coaching legends that they weren't any good, and I don't know if we really have the right to do that. But that's just.
Well, I'm not understanding, Chris.
I read
your point.
In the chat.
In the chat.
I read in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, in the chat, so we saw if he was 2-8 in Rose Bowl and this and that, and you know, and he only beat Ohio State X amount of times, and you know, only won this many championships. And it's like, you know, I want to tell everybody, how many championships have you won? You know, I know what the answer is already, 0. So I mean, kind of, unless they, you know, maybe there's a one or two token few there that maybe were, but kind of have suspicions they probably weren't. So I don't like it. I'm just telling you, I don't like the criticism, but I don't think we have a right to do that. But that's fine. I mean, if we want to like throw darts, I guess that's something we can do here. But I just don't know if I don't know. I know I'm not. I'll just put it that way. I know I'm not smart enough to know really who the best coaches were. But you know, I don't know that we have a right to really say that XYZ wasn't as good as ABC or whatever. But you know, we have a right to an opinion on it. But, those are some pretty good programs to say they weren't really good. It's kind of what I'm getting at, but whatever. I think the topic was dynasties, and you know, when I think of a dynasty, I guess the first team that comes to my mind is the Yankees. That's the obvious one. Obviously, that's not a hard one to throw up in the air. But and in professional football, I guess it might be. You know, it kind of depends on what era you want to talk about, but I actually kind of think like the San Francisco 49ers would make a good dynasty. You know, because they have such a long history, you know, and I guess I don't really, for some reason, I don't necessarily put New England at the top of the list, but I guess that's probably a pretty good one to throw out there. Like I said, I kind of think of San Francisco, and then maybe trying to think of somebody else that might. That's about it, really. I don't really follow pro football that closely. Maybe the Bears. I think the Bears are a pretty good example of one. They've been good for pretty long, you know, and maybe other people might not agree with that. That's fine. But,
what would be your time frame on the Chicago Bears being a dynasty? The 40s?
Well, I just George Halas.
Okay.
Yeah, George Halas.
Sure.
You know, when they had, you know, I don't know how you could say they weren't dominant, but you know, that's just my opinion, though. I mean, I'm not saying that that's the first team everybody else will probably agree about, but you know, I think if you just focus in on like one, you know, decade, and it's probably not going to be the Bears, but you know, and the Patriots are a good example of a team that's been consistently very good. For some reason, that's more like, to me, that's like looking, just like zeroing in on the modern era, though. It's like, I mean, the Patriots, I think, I don't know. Maybe I'm a little biased against the Patriots. I don't know. I've never been there, so I don't know. I don't know what life's like back there, but I'm from the, I tend to think of the Western teams more so, I guess, because where I'm from. But, I'd probably pick San Francisco, maybe, Green Bay, obviously, is a good example of a team that's been consistently pretty good for a while. Another team that I know when Denver, when they went to their first Super Bowl, they had to beat the Raiders, but I'm not sure if the Raiders constitute a dynasty or not, but that's who they had to get past to get there. So they must have been, they were at least the next best team in line, which, of course, that was in the 70s. That was when I was still about 9 years old or 10 years old. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously, I mean, they were, I think you can't really talk about dominant teams without mentioning the Steelers and the Dolphins. I think even the Miami Dolphins, I think if you think about their history, I remember I was in the 70s, but, they were among the better teams that I liked personally. I had a strong, my ambition was to play for the Miami Dolphins. When I was 6 years old, I thought, well, yeah, that's who I'll play for. And then Notre Dame, as a college team, I wanted to play. I didn't really know the difference. I even kind of wondered why our local football team didn't ever play the Denver Broncos. That's kind of what I knew about football, but I just thought it was all the same. But the Miami Dolphins, those are the teams I think of when I think of dynasty. Don Shula, Greasy, Larry Zonka. That's just the offensive players, but I thought they were really very good, and I still think they're really good. Even now, I think they're still pretty good. But anyway, did you have anything else you want to talk about?
Not really. We can talk about anything in college football that you want to. This is just I tend to steer the conversation in one direction, just to put a topic out there to start the conversation. But I want to be and am available here to talk college football every time, and not necessarily the topic that's been delivered. Anything you want to talk about?
All right. Well, there was just one last thing. Like I said, some people don't like what I have to say, so I don't want to take all their time away from them if they have more important things to talk about. Their last caller said something to the effect, I'll probably misquote him, so I don't, if I do, I'm sorry in advance, but something to the effect that we didn't really have a legitimate championship until the BCS came along. I think that's baloney. That's not even close to it. I've gone through every year that I can think of, and I'm sure there were probably multiple examples of a team maybe not getting full recognition. I don't even doubt that, but I really think that the history is such that maybe it wasn't exclusive to one team. I can maybe understand how that might have been true, but I don't think the voters ever really decided any national championship. I mean, they might have contributed to one, but he made it sound like, well, there was never a real. People have used that narrative before, and I hate it because it's like people couldn't figure out who the best team was without taking a vote. I don't think it was ever like that. I think people kind of knew who the best team was. Maybe it took a vote to kind of figure out consensusly who it might have been, but you could name a year. I probably wouldn't know off the top of my head, but I mean, I could tell you probably who I think it might have been. Like in 1960, for example, I think it might have been Mississippi, but that's me without looking into it. I don't know. It might not have been.
Chris, I'm just trying to understand the last comment that you just made. So you're saying that the voters did not decide the national championship? Well, of course they did. They just didn't randomly select teams that didn't merit selection or merit consideration, but they did make the final consideration. And the issue that I have with the national championships down through the years, in addition to some of the illogical choices that were made by the voters, and to defend the voters on another point, is that sometimes we came across situations, and this was pretty common, where there is difficulty in distinguishing who should win a national championship, because you had 2, 3, 4 teams involved that had very similar track records, and they didn't play each other. They didn't play each other in the postseason, but only one was going to be selected. Right. That doesn't mean that the other teams that were not selected were not as valid.
Good. Well, I mean, it might have been a judgment call. I'm not going to say there wasn't.
Well, of course it
judgment
was. It's always
call,
a judgment call.
But I guess my objection, if that makes sense, is it's almost like making it sound like there wasn't a fair way to select a national champion. And I just.
Oh, there wasn't a fair way. It was not a fair way.
Well, it doesn't really make sense to me, but whether it was or wasn't.
You think that that was fair,
but,
to have people vote for a national champion among teams that
I
generally did not play each other?
Well, I don't know, Mark. I think there's such a thing as you don't have to have everybody play everybody to kind of figure out. I mean, you're smart enough to know, Mark. I think that's not necessarily the best way to. I mean, it surprises me a little bit. I'm not saying that you don't know what you're doing, but everybody has to play everybody, or we won't know. I mean, that's kind of I kind of think we kind of do know without having to put everybody together. I mean, I'm just, maybe I'm old school. Maybe that's what it boils down to. I'm old school. You're not. But it's like, and plus, there's not. I don't think in the. Correct me if I'm wrong. Please do. I don't think in the NCAA there's a pretty, between the different conferences and between, it's not like if you're in the SEC or if you're in it's not like there's I mean, there is some degree of, what do you want to call it, parity, I guess. But it's like, generally speaking, if you're the best team in the Big Ten, generally, I think you even might agree with this. You might not. It's fine. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you kind of know without even having the game played who's probably going to, if it's going to be like, let's say, Ohio State and even like Utah. I mean, even though it was a good game, I think most people, I think, would probably say that it's probably, and this is in hindsight, obviously, but I don't know that I would have predicted Utah would beat Ohio State. That would have been an upset for me. Even though Utah looked like they were pretty good, I think most people understood that Ohio State was a better program. And it was a good game, and I guess it could have gone either way, but I don't think it really surprised that many people that Ohio State was able to defeat Utah. I don't think that was a huge surprise and a big upset, and everybody was really, that's kind of my point. And you talk about, was it 1994 he talked about, Nebraska and Penn State? I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's very possible that Penn State could have, but I think there might be a reason why Penn State wasn't elected I guess they don't really elect them. There's probably a good reason why Penn State wasn't voted the number one team. It's like, I don't think it's just people saying, well, I'd rather it be Nebraska because they're, they have all this history. And I mean, I guess, there's always that possibility, Mark, but I don't know that it's really wrong.
Chris, the reason that 1 out of 2 or 3 teams were selected during those years as the national champion is because there was a vote. So every voter had to make a decision. That doesn't mean that there was a clear-cut decision to be made. If you presented me with 2 teams and both teams were, let's say, 11-1, they played strong schedules, they were impressive in their bowl victories, and you said, you got to pick one to win the national championship. Well, if I had to, I'd have to make the decision. That doesn't mean I would be confident in that decision. That doesn't mean I don't believe that those teams should actually have to play to determine the national championship. Just because I made a decision doesn't mean it was a good decision. And certainly it can be debated and it can be argued whether that was a good decision. We can go through the final vote in the AP, for example, year to year, and it's easy to, on a fairly regular basis, question, if not completely tear to shreds, the decisions that were made by AP voters.
Right. Well,
and sometimes, and I'll just finish my thought real quick. And I'm not blaming them, because many of the times they just had to make a decision. And again, I'm not faulting them for the decision they made. I'm just bringing to light that there were other teams in play that had just as good a qualifications as the team that was determined to be the national champion. And that's why I, in my own little world, have determined to distribute the national championship slightly different than what they've been determined in history by other people. We're all just people.
Yeah.
But instead of saying that USC's 12-1 and Alabama's 12-1 and only one of them get a national championship, in 1978,
1978.
then I determine,
Okay.
At least they both deserve a share of the national championship. Or in my case, I believe that USC should be the sole national champion of that year because they won the game against Alabama.
Was that the year that Michigan almost beat USC?
Yes.
Wasn't that the year that Michigan should have? I mean, those things kind of enter into it, Mark. I'm not saying. I think there was a controversial play in which Michigan wasn't able to capitalize on.
Well, Alabama won the Sugar Bowl on a controversial play against Penn State at the goal line. How about that?
Okay. Well, no, I'm just saying. I mean, there's some people that thought maybe that USC benefited, I guess, from the call that was,
Well, they did benefit from the
I don't
call.
know, but that's really what I think.
Sure, they benefited from the call. I don't know what the right or wrong call was, but they certainly benefited from it, just like Alabama benefited from the play at the goal line against Penn State in the Sugar Bowl. So let's consider those to be a wash. All I know is that they both went 12-1, and USC won by 10 points at Alabama. And why otherwise reasonable, logical people cannot take that very simple data, 12-1, 12-1, measure the schedules. They're very comparable. One team beat the other team by 10 points at their stadium, and they vote for the other team as the national champion. Like in no other line of business would this make any sense whatsoever.
Well, I don't know that I just necessarily disagree with you. I'm just saying maybe they weighed certain things into consideration, and maybe
I would love to know what they were weighing into consideration. Probably their ignorance was what in some way. Or
but you're kind of making a judgment, which I don't know.
I'm making a judgment.
How would you know?
They made a judgment between two 12-1 teams where one team beat the other one by 10 points, but they voted for the other team to win the national championship. But I'm making a judgment. I'm trying to correct their lack of judgment is what I'm doing.
Didn't you have objections to 1996 too?
Yes.
Am I wrong about that?
Yes.
But there's really nothing to object to, is there?
Why?
I mean, I can't think of anything to object to about it.
Why?
Well, Florida won it.
Why?
Well, that's why.
What was their record?
Well, it was better. I think it was one game better, wasn't it, than Florida State? Am I wrong about that? I think they played an additional game. I think if you had to choose between them and Florida State, I think it's an easy. I know it's.
Well, that's my point.
It's a tie.
That's my point. We shouldn't have to choose. They should play in a
playoff. I think
we
have to. I think it was Florida. No?
Why? They played twice and they split.
Yeah, well, so did last year. So did Alabama and Georgia. I don't know.
No. There's a huge difference between those two scenarios. The first scenario in 1996, yes, let me explain it to you. We see it play out in the NFL every year. Are there teams that win the Super Bowl that have lost games in the regular season?
Sure.
Of course.
Always.
Do we name those teams that beat the Super Bowl champion as the Super Bowl champion and say, well, the Lions beat the Packers during the regular season and the Packers won the Super Bowl, so the Lions must be the Super Bowl champion? No, we don't do that.
No.
Because there's a playoff format.
Yeah.
So once the teams reach the playoff, everybody's 0-0 and they play a playoff. And that's what happened this past season.
I understand that.
So Georgia won the national championship. But in 1996, in 1996, the Sugar Bowl was not a playoff. It was not a championship game. It was just the Sugar Bowl, just like the Liberty Bowl, the Rose Bowl. It's just another game. And so Florida avenged a loss against Florida State, but Florida State beat Florida just like Florida beat Florida State. And they both lost one game. So why is Florida the national champion? Because they won the most recent game?
No.
And why is Ohio State not sharing a national championship? They were 11-1 as well.
I don't know.
So in my books, you've got a shared national championship between three teams. Because it's not fair to award a national championship to any one of those three teams exclusively.
You're leaving out Brigham Young.
No, I'm not leaving out Brigham Young. No, I'm not.
Yeah, sure.
Not leaving out a team that did not play a major schedule.
Uh-huh. Well, they beat Kansas State. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
Kansas State
I'm
was
not
pretty good.
leaving out Brigham Young. I know they went 14-1. All right, Chris. Thank you for the call.
Belt champion.
All right, I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
The famous belt champion. We'll have to ask Chris the next time he's on who the current belt champion is. I think it's Baylor. So they're the belt champion. Yeah, I don't know. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hi, Mark. This is actually Yakov 22.
Yakov. How you doing today?
How are you, Mark?
I'm
I'm
good.
doing well, Mark. Well, I haven't been able to. I missed your. I know I like to both contribute and to follow your Ohio State shows usually, but for some reason, I'm sorry. The last few weeks, I just couldn't get on at the time that you were having it.
Well, we missed you.
But yeah. Well, I know you have one tomorrow at. And by the way, Mark, actually, I figured out. This is not why I called them, but I actually just tried to make a super chat to the show, of course. But I realized what's going on. I just can't. I'm on my phone right now. I'm not on my computer. In fact, I'm not even at home. My phone just won't allow it for some reason. But I don't know if you've experienced that before, but or that anyone else has reported such a thing. I can do it no problem on the computer, but for some reason my phone just keeps going in a circle and it just won't allow it to go through. So I apologize for that, but maybe I can make up the super chat tomorrow during the Buckeye show.
I appreciate the effort. Keep in mind, Yakov, we had our Buckeye show today. That was today at 1:30.
Oh.
Thursday.
Okay, well, I'll have to do it another time then, Mike.
We will see you next week.
Tomorrow okay, well, maybe you'll see me before then, but as far as that show, that'll have to wait a week. And again, with the super chat, I'll make sure I'm trying to do it in front of the computer next time instead of being on the phone.
I appreciate that.
Mark, I did want to say something in regards. I know we're talking about dynasties, and this is not exactly college football, but I have a feeling that as a result of what I actually was going to super chat you just now that didn't go through, and what I'm going to tell you about right now, you might give me a slight amount of leniency that it's not exactly college football, though it is football related. Well, as you know, you and I both would value sports history, particularly that of the college and the NFL. I don't know if you did, but how I picked that up. My interest is my father very much is a sports, particularly football, college and NFL football historian. He started listening to sports on the radio in the 1950s. He's 74 years old. Started listening from the mid to late 1950s. Started watching in the infancy of sports on TV, and I guess around 1960 or so. And and I've come to believe the following, Mark. He feels that there's a certain NFL football coach that potentially is somewhere between the second and fourth best coach in NFL history. Yet somehow history has not allowed that to really ring true. I mean, everyone these days would agree that Lombardi and Belichick are the top two, and perhaps Bill Walsh is third. We could talk about that, but I know some people might say Chuck Noll, but I really don't. Despite him winning 4 Super Bowls, I don't think he's even in the top 5. But Mark, my father, who's actually not even a fan of this team necessarily, doesn't like them, insists that there's an argument to be made that Tom Landry is no worse than the second best coach in NFL history. And why he says that, and I was just looking at it myself. Most of these things that I'm going to say took place before I was either born or when I was a very small child, and in your case, before you were born or when you were, also, I know you're about 6 years older than me, but also perhaps very big infancy of your sportshood. But in 1966, Mark, Tom Landry, they lost 34-27 to the very close game to the Packers. And then in the following year, 67, that famous Ice Bowl, where the Packers scored, 40 degrees below zero, probably should not have been played in that game. Probably should have been delayed, but they lost the Ice Bowl game to the Packers in 67 in the very last play of the game, I believe. In 1970, they lost a very, very close 16-13 to the Colts in the Super Bowl. They also, in 74, I believe, they lost to very outstanding Steelers team by a very close game. And of course, in the '78 Super Bowl, I believe when Jackie Slater should have caught that pass.
Jackie Smith
slipped in the end zone, and Jackie Smith. Jackie Slater's an offensive lineman, but Jackie Smith, hit him in the shoulder pad, and he slipped, and they had to field. And I believe they actually had a pass at the end of the game that hit a receiver in the end zone in the hand, or a hand, and they didn't make their play, and the Steelers won the game.
That was the 76 Super Bowl. That was the 76 Super Bowl when they had the pass to the end zone. The 79 Super Bowl ended with a onside kick that was recovered by the Steelers. Yakov, not to cut you off in any such way. You can continue as soon as I state this, but I don't say this in any kind of arrogant sort of way. I say this just because of what I'm interested in and what I know. I doubt if you're going to be able to state anything about Tom Landry's career that I'm not going to know. So I know everything basically that you've stated. That yes, about the Cowboys' run from 1960 through '89. But keep going if you would like.
Yeah, I should have looked at the details of those Super Bowls. Of course, I've seen the highlights, Mark. But I wasn't alive for those Super Bowls. I was one in. I was born in '74, but I was young. I didn't watch those games. If I did, maybe my dad had it on. I was running it out, but no conscious memory of that. So yeah, I should have looked at the details. I knew they were extremely close. And then, of course, if you want to look in '82, 40 years ago, that very close game. They didn't say they should have won, but that extremely close game against the Niners, with just one stop, one sack, one batted pass down, and of course, one of the greatest throws and catches in history. They would have been the Super Bowl. I can't prove they would have beat the Bengals, but I think they would have. That's actually the first Super Bowl that I watched up to finish, the 82 Super Bowl. And those together all those things are just named, Mark, don't add up to one win. They are all losses, but he was just darn close to winning 2 more Super Bowls and 2 more championships. And even half those go his way. He's probably right up there with Lombardi. It might be the Lombardi Landry trophy that you hoist up after the other Super Bowl. But he was just inches short in multiple games against some of the greatest teams ever. In this case, twice against the Steelers and twice against the Packers. They came up a little short, and as a result of that, maybe we can call him the third best coach, but there'll be a lot of people who might put him farther down, maybe 4th, 5th or so, because he was just so close to it. And I know that that's just something my father, who is not particularly a Dallas fan, he's not an anti-Dallas fan, but an anti-Dallas, but he swears by that he believes that Landry is, in his opinion, the second best coach in NFL history.
Well, Yakov, I just posted a video and I just put it in the chat. I produced a video a number of years ago on this channel, and I just found it. And so I grabbed the link and I put it in this chat. You may want to check it out, where I named for myself, in my opinion, that Tom Landry is the greatest coach in the history of the NFL. So okay. I'm way ahead of you.
I gave him second. You put him first, so that's even better, I guess.
So here are my thoughts. I will not restate anything that you just stated. You went through a lot of close losses and a lot of unfortunate circumstances involving Tom Landry. I think the first thing that has to be considered is that he took over a expansion franchise. So back then, this was not the 1996 Carolina Panthers or Jacksonville Jaguars that were given expansion players and given legitimate NFL players. They basically had to just figure out where to find players. And so to build an expansion franchise in 1960, you were basically playing with just cast-offs. So it took 5 years to build the franchise. They were playing with guys that were packing groceries 2 weeks earlier. They were just playing with whatever they could find for the most part. So it took 5 to 6 years until that, as you mentioned, that 1966 season to build a winning franchise. So that's one aspect of his record that takes a hit, is his winning percentage took a hit because he led an expansion franchise during a time in which they were not given legitimate NFL talent to begin the process. there is certainly a conspiracy theory that the Green Bay Packers allowed the Lambeau Field to freeze the night prior to the Ice Bowl because Dallas had a much faster team, more athletic team, and a much younger team than the Packers did, and that that there's some really good documentaries out there concerning the heating grid, and that it basically was a sheet of ice because it was ineffective. The tarp was ripped. There was all sorts of things done or allegedly done that created not just 13 below zero wind chill, and they're not even wind chill, just 13 below zero, but also that there was consideration given to delaying the game until Monday. But so that's not an excuse. All the players had to play on that field, but there might have been some gamesmanship by Vince Lombardi there. To your note about Lombardi versus Landry, as you well know, Lombardi coached the Giants offense and Landry coached the Giants defense for NFL championship teams in the 50s. And what's interesting is that Lombardi coached the offense, Landry coached the defense, but when they became head coaches, Landry led a much more sophisticated offense than Lombardi did. Lombardi basically ran, I'm exaggerating, 3 plays, and Landry was the one who, in addition to going through all the game ledgers and the Super Bowls and the NFC Championship games that we could, Tom Landry invented the 4-3 defense. So basically, the majority of the NFL for the last 70 years has played a 4-3 defense that was developed and created by Tom Landry, number one. Number two, Tom Landry was the coach that was smart enough to look at the rule book and determine that shifts and motion weren't against the rules, that he could have players, after they lined up at the line of scrimmage, move and shift and go in motion before the snap of the ball, and it wasn't illegal. So he's the one that figured that out. And number three, what do we see quarterbacks, well, almost exclusively every play, but for a long time after Tom Landry instituted this, we saw it on third down, was the quarterback line up in the shotgun formation. Well, Tom Landry, I don't want to say he invented that, but from a passing standpoint, he did invent that. He basically went back to, if you watch film of the spread formation back in the 30s and 40s, they would snap the ball in a spread formation, like a pistol formation, but they would run the ball. And Tom Landry figured out that, well, especially on third down, I want my quarterback to gain a split second advantage of already being back in the pocket. So we're going to run a shotgun offense. And when I started watching the NFL for years and years and years, the Cowboys were the only team in the NFL that ran a shotgun. Nobody else did that for years, until everybody finally figured out, oh, this is smart. And like you say, if you go back and watch Super Bowl 13 in 1979, credit the Steelers. They won the game, and they didn't do anything unfairly, but there were just enormous bad breaks in that game. The NFL actually sent the Dallas Cowboys a letter a few weeks after that Super Bowl apologizing for the rash of bad calls in that game. One of which was a 66-yard pass interference call on Benny Barnes against Lynn Swann. That was a phantom play. There were a lot of bad breaks in that game. When Roy Gerela, the Pittsburgh Steelers place kicker, when the game was still close, in the fourth quarter, he slipped, and instead of kicking deep, he slipped and squibbed a kick that Randy White tried to pick up, and Randy White had a cast on his arm, and he couldn't hold the ball, and he fumbled. And there was just a litany of things that went against the Cowboys in that game against the Steelers. And, one of the most unknown mysteries in Super Bowl play goes back to Super Bowl V. And I just discovered this just a few years ago. because I saw something on NFL Films about it, and then I researched it, and the Cowboys led the Colts in that Super Bowl that you're well aware of, that Jim O'Brien won for the Colts on a last-second field goal at the Orange Bowl,
Right.
Over Dallas. That the Cowboys had a touchdown lead in the fourth quarter. I think it was 10-3 or 13-6, I think was the score. And they were going in for a 2-touchdown lead. And in a game in which neither team was scoring or mounting much offense, that would have been a pretty monumental lead. You should look this up online and see if you can find it. There is reason to believe that when Dwayne Thomas fumbled the ball into the end zone in Super Bowl V, that the Cowboys clearly recovered the fumble. And it was given to the Colts. And they got a touchback to the 20-yard line, or the Cowboys would have been up 20-6 with about 10 minutes left in the game. Oh yeah, there's all sorts of things. And the only other one I'll bring up would be the Dwight Clark catch game that you brought up, that a lot of people don't remember, that after the Niners went on that drive, and credit certainly Joe Montana and Bill Walsh for masterminding that drive, in which the thought process during the drive was, okay, there's only 4 minutes left in the game. I think there was actually 4:51 on the clock when the drive started, that they would be in pass mode. They got the ball at their own 17-yard line, and you'll have to forgive me, Yakov, for rambling on about this, but
I'm fine, Mark.
In the previous drive, it's very unfortunate for the Cowboys because they were in field goal range to go up by 9 points. They were up 27-21, and Doug Donnelly dropped like a 3rd and 6 play, just a blatant drop that would have put Dallas in at least field goal range to go up by 9 points and pretty much salt the game away, if not continue to march down the field and score a touchdown. But anyway, the Niners got the ball, and everybody just assumed they would be in pass mode, and the Cowboys played a nickel defense, and to Bill Walsh's credit, they gained most of the early yardage on that drive by running the ball. And then, of course, they made the catch. But the play that gets forgotten is Dallas gets the ball with about 50 seconds left in the game, and Danny White hits Drew Pearson on a seam route for like a huge gain, like a 35-yard gain. And Drew Pearson, for a split second, looked like he was gone. And I believe it was either Eric Wright or Dwight Hicks. I can't remember which one. It was one of the two 49er defensive backs. It would actually have been called a horse collar today, but he grabbed Drew Pearson around the shoulder pad around his neck and dragged him down. Otherwise, Drew Pearson would have scored the game-winning touchdown, or at least the game go-ahead touchdown with about 30 seconds left in the game. And unfortunately, it was still a huge gain for the Cowboys out to midfield. They got the ball to about the 49 or 45-yard line. But unfortunately, next play, Danny White gets strip sacked, and the game was over.
Right. I do remember that play. I remember that happening sitting in my couch on a freezing cold day in Canton, Ohio.
There you go. Check out the Drew Pearson play.
Yeah.
The play before the Stuckey, I believe it was Jim Stuckey, stripped Danny White.
I'm going to go on YouTube and check that out, Mark.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I also left you a video link if you have time. My argument of why Tom Landry is the greatest coach of all time, but certainly you probably heard most of it right now. So,
well, maybe I'd like to see your video summary as well, though. Mark, I appreciate it. I'm glad I brought up something that you're so passionate about. That's why I preface it by saying it's not exactly college football, but I had a feeling that it's because of the topic that you might give me a little break on that. And I enjoyed our call. I'm looking forward to commenting and watching other shows and this show and other shows as well.
Thanks, Yakov. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for calling.
Have a good evening, Mark.
You too. Gary, not to nitpick here, when you said Mark slipped, and certainly I say all sorts of things. I have typo of the mouth all sorts of times where I say things that I don't necessarily, I mixed up Miami or the Rose Bowl or whatever. But you may want to double check that. I was not incorrect in that. The Dallas-Pittsburgh 79 Super Bowl 13, was at the Orange Bowl in Miami. The next year, the Steelers beat the Rams at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena in 1980. The game that you're citing was not played in Southern California at the end of the 78 regular season. Look it up. It was played in Miami at the Orange Bowl. Both Dallas, Pittsburgh Steelers 70s Super Bowl games were played at the Orange Bowl. The first one was on AstroTurf, and then they changed it to natural grass. All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Hey, how's it going, Mark? This is Dr. C.
Dr. C, what's going on?
We're talking about dynasty, so I always have to bring up USC.
Sure.
2002 to 2009.
I agree.
Pete Carroll, back-to-back titles, almost what has never been done before, the three-peat.
I agree. I agree that that's a dynasty. I also think that certainly had we had a college football playoff at that time, that USC would have played in it pretty much every year from 02, maybe not 02, anyway, all the way through to 08.
Yeah, I think it was 08 with them when they were probably the best team in the country and didn't get a chance to play for a title.
Now, see, there's a perfect example
unfortunate.
right there where, for me, when I'm looking at national championships, to me, Florida's the national champion, but USC is also the national champion. They had the same record. They both played in major conferences against elite competition. Why is Florida the national champion? Because they got put in a BCS championship game. That's why.
Yeah, those definitely were the days, unfortunately. But in regards to dynasties, how about the Boise States, like the 2002 to 2005, where they won 4 WAC titles in a row? Is that a dynasty, or do you just consider it an era because it's not a Power 5 conference?
That's a great question. I don't want to relegate dynasties to just the Power 5. Boise State, yeah, you could consider that a dynasty, and they were not given a chance to win a national championship, so that's not their fault. They certainly proved capable of defeating high-level Power 5 teams in both the regular season and in postseason play. So, yeah, that Boise State run, however you want to kind of cap that, because you had several coaches involved. Of course, Houston Nutt was at the genesis of it, and then all the way through to almost today, but more so, about 7 or 8 years ago.
Absolutely. There's so many of those, when you think of teams that would have, I would even consider them teams dynasties that just had solid seasons year after year, that didn't necessarily win a conference title, but were, very consistent. That in itself is a dynasty, isn't it? Or what are your thoughts?
Wait a minute. Who's a dynasty? I'm sorry.
Just a team that's consistent, not necessarily won conference title after conference title or anything really, but just was a consistent team. They were in the top 3 year after year.
In the top
let's
3?
say 4 or 5 years.
In the top 3 in college football, or in the top 3 of their conference?
No. In their conference.
A dynasty? No, that's not a dynasty to me. Like Penn State's a dynasty right now?
Yeah, Penn State. Well, they're kind of, Penn State's one of those teams where they're just highly regarded. Or, for instance, like a Notre Dame, that in itself, they've had dynasties in many ways without winning titles.
Yeah, I think if we go to that degree, we've lessened it way too much.
Yeah, you're probably right. Now, final question. Now, it's a controversial topic, but they've touched Penn State, and whatnot, with Joe Pa himself being iconic, and I've always wondered how. I watched finally that HBO movie with Al Pacino in regards to him.
Yes.
I never really understood, because I've always thought of Joe Pa as a man of integrity and just old school. And the way that they pictured him in that movie was when anyone brought up anything to do with Sandusky, he immediately cut it off and could not. He could not even imagine that they could be saying such things, and he'd leave upset and disgusted. Was that what happened there? I always wondered. I never wanted to really dig into it, but because Joe Pa, I held him with such high regard.
What movie is that again?
It's with Al Pacino, HBO. It's let me take a look.
I'd be curious to see it.
It's called Paterno. Oh, this is a real stretch. It's called Paterno. It was made in 2018.
No, I've never heard of it. Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
you're asking.
I never quite.
I was just stating. So you're asking me to explain what happened?
No. I mean, for me, I've never been able to really understand how Joe Pa handled the situation. Like I said, I always held him in such high regard. I just can't imagine that he would have been compliant in that situation. And I don't know what the final deterrent, like in the movie itself, Paterno is just someone that just will not, in his mind, he can't accept anyone saying anything about Sandusky other than he's an exceptional human being. And I always wondered, like, how Joe Pa, was he involved in covering up? It seemed the way the movie portrayed him was that he would not entertain it, cut it off, and in a way, I wanted to see, I guess, how compliant was Joe Pa part of that, since you know so much about college football. I was obviously disturbed by what happened, but like I said, I really liked Joe Pa.
I only know what's been reported, and of course, while all that was going on, I soaked up as much information as I possibly could. The aftermath of that does not reflect well on Joe Paterno. Unfortunately, he passed away and was not here to defend himself or explain. We did not get to see him on 60 Minutes or some type of platform like that to hear what he had to say.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, it's been, 9 years, 10 years since all that came down. So my memory's a bit fuzzy in regards to the specifics of how he was, the specifics of what he had to say, what his responses were. And I mean responses in terms of action or inaction, but that is bottom line the problem. And the mark against him is that he did not take action. He didn't do anything. And I don't want to say anything that's inaccurate in any such way, because again, my memory's gone from that incident and all of that, except for coming away from all the evidence that was presented and all the various stories, putting all of them together, that he was presented with a situation that he should have acted on. He should have acted on immediately, even if he believed the best about his defensive coordinator. He should have acted upon it. If I was in his situation and the defensive coordinator was my best friend, but there were these allegations brought, I'd have to pursue them, because obviously right is right and wrong is wrong, and then hope that my best friend is is innocent, but he, by all accounts, didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, yeah, and I was kind of reading what someone said on the chat right there, and it said, yeah, he seemed detached from it, and he just, the way, like I said, they portrayed him, he in his mind he could never accept that was the truth, and would get upset and kind of, I think he stormed off a couple of times. It's like, you're making this up, you may be after money or something. That's the way it seemed like Paterno reacted to that. Because I always wondered, like I said, I always admired Paterno. And that was like the biggest fall from grace in maybe sports history. How highly regarded he was, iconic. And then now he's someone that it's troubling to mention him now. It's a really tragic story.
Yeah.
And then how about the hire after Bill O'Brien? I mean, those kids needed like someone that's, I think, a little bit more relaxed, right? Like they've been through a traumatic, the team after that with the sanctions, but O'Brien did a heck of a job. I mean, he has a really strong personality.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the call. Thank you so much for that. And we will catch up with you soon.
Of course. All right. Thank you, Mark. Bye.
All right. And not to rush us off here, because we do have 2 calls coming in, and I will take them. I kind of lost track of time. We do have a Miami show at 8 o'clock Eastern time that we typically have to take to air a little bit late because of the Wholesome One arriving after his job. So let me take care of this real quick. Okay. All right. Next up here, the voice of college football. Who's on the line? And by the way, before the caller goes, Andrew, again, not to be nitpicky, but it is inaccurate. The Pittsburgh Steelers did not play a Super Bowl in Rice Stadium in Houston. That was the Dolphins and the Vikings. That was a year before the Steelers played their first Super Bowl at Tulane Stadium in New Orleans. All right. Go ahead. Who's on the line?
Hi, Mark. It's Eric.
Hey, Eric. How are you?
I'm good. I really liked that thing we did with the schedule the other day for the Ducks. So I found another team that I thought was interesting, and I wanted to do that.
Okay.
Okay. So 2022 Arkansas, Cincinnati comes to Fayetteville.
Okay, I'm going to try to rip these off rapid fire. So let's start over. Cincinnati, okay. Arkansas, win.
Okay. South Carolina comes to Fayetteville.
Win.
Missouri State comes to Fayetteville.
Win.
Arkansas goes to A&M.
Loss.
Alabama comes to Fayetteville.
Loss.
Mississippi State. Oh, Arkansas goes to Mississippi State.
Win.
Arkansas goes to Provo, Utah. The Cougars. BYU.
Ooh. Win.
Arkansas goes to Auburn.
Win.
Liberty comes to Fayetteville.
Win.
LSU comes to Fayetteville.
Loss.
Ole Miss comes to Fayetteville.
Loss.
And finally, Arkansas travels to Missouri.
Win.
Okay, so you said losses to Alabama, LSU, and Ole Miss. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's all I wanted to do, and I know you're trying to get out of here, so thank you.
I appreciate the call, man. Have a good one, Eric.
Bye. Yep.
All right. Last call here at the Voice of College Football, but everybody remember, keep in mind that you can join us on the Miami stream here in just a few minutes after we get done here. Just like as soon as I can set it up and go, we will be on live on the Miami channel. Thanks for calling. Who's on the line?
Mark, DeAndre, Morgan State, Dynasty, Mount Union, Dynasty, and Tennessee State.
Tennessee State,
please.
Morgan State, and who else?
Mount Union.
Oh, Mount Union. Yeah. Okay.
Morgan State won a bunch of that CIAA championship from 1940. I think it won 8 total. And straight in the 1940s, and a bunch of the 60s, Tennessee State won 5 black championships. You can't help society was what it was in the 70s and 80s. So, you know, those teams didn't get a chance to compete for the big things. So, you know, and Mount Union, Dynasty. So I'm going to let you go because I know you got to go to the manager. Hey, boy, I do want to ask you one question.
Sure.
I'll let you go. Arizona beat Miami. Why does nobody talk about how bad Tennessee and Arizona beat Miami in the 80s in bowl games?
29-0.
Yep.
And Tennessee 35-7
right?
made Vinny Testaverde look awful in that game. 35-7. Yeah, in the Sugar Bowl.
I can't even think of who might have been on Tennessee's team at that time.
Oh, man. I should be able to come up with that, but let's not jog my brain right this second. Yeah, 1985, Tennessee. Tennessee wasn't great either. They went like 9-3.
And that's what I'm saying. A lot of times, and that's why I say sometimes we bring up stuff and like these teams got. That's what I was saying about the Clemson thing. I'll let it go because I know you got to go, but it's like look at what Clemson did in the 80s of bowl games. I know the Arizona game was 91. They go back and look at some of the Miami scores, and Miami got dusted off by Tennessee pretty good that year. I mean, I don't, you know, everybody say, oh, they won 3 national championships in the 80s. But when they got beat pretty bad. I mean, when it was bowl game time. And that's the time when people play. But yeah, but I remember that Desert Storm defense, they lit Miami up. But I can't even tell you who they had on offense at Arizona at that time. It was kind of a shocker.
Yeah, it was. Teddy Bruschi and company. No. Who am I thinking of? Who am I? That was in 93? 92 was
somewhere around.
92 was when they lost to Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. I think it was the next year, 93. That would have been before Teddy Bruschi's time. Oh, maybe not. No, Bruschi played in the Patriots Super Bowl against the Packers in 96. So, yeah, that would have been Teddy Bruschi's team. And they had a couple other NFL. Chuck Levy, I believe, was the running back for Arizona.
Oh, wow. Green Bay. I didn't realize that. Okay. Well, Mark, have a good day, man. I'll be listening on the Miami channel. Bring that question up to him.
Hey, he's not going to want to talk about the 1993 Fiesta Bowl. Even though I could talk about that stuff all night.
Yeah,
all right,
I had
DeAndre.
to catch you earlier when you were talking with free time. All right.
No, go ahead.
No, we good, man.
Okay.
I catch you on the channel, man.
I appreciate the contribution, sir. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Oh, man. All right, Mark. You take care, man.
Thanks, DeAndre. Have a good night. All right. We are going to wrap it up and shut it down here at the Voice of College Football. Keep in mind that, yes, as Joey says here, we've got the Super Chat running as well, but support the live shows. Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, search Mark Rogers TV. We've got a huge West Virginia show coming your way at 8 o'clock Eastern time. That's going to be right here on the main channel, but also on our West Virginia channel. So head on over there and subscribe to our West Virginia channel. Again, Friday, 8 Eastern. And who knows, maybe I'll follow that up by going live here with another call-in show because we're going to start stacking up the call-in shows big here. And I will get... I am working on a schedule. I would like to be able to present a schedule that I can stick to most of the time, but just hit that bell for the notifications and keep it coming. head on over to the Miami channel. We're going to be fired up here with a wholesome one in just a second here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you in a couple minutes on the Miami channel. And if not, tomorrow night, West Virginia, and a call-in show.